for Housatonic Live with the great Mark Kulak and West Coast Journal Carol. Let's bring him into the studio. Good afternoon, Mark. Hello, Carol.
Woo.
Hi, John. Hi, Mark.
I can barely hear myself think over the house party. You got your turntable there. I didn't know that. I like it.
We also have co-producer Tyrone running the boards.
Is he remote?
He's in a remote location in the south of the USA.
Oh,
Cool.
well, it's
He's doing a good job.
good to be here. Hello, Carol. How are you?
Hi, Mark. I'm good. It's still cloudy here, but getting nicer in Portland.
Hard as
Warmer.
hell. Well, I mean, you don't have a window in back of you. I'm assuming yours is over here.
It's to the side.
Yeah, I'm
I
sort of
can
the
see
same thing here. My window's over there.
Mhm.
That's where the natural
Yeah.
light is. I just saw the some of Andy's show, which is pretty darn good. It was good to have him on doing some reading today. And yes, we are, both Carol and I are familiar with Dr. Sabin or Sabine. Perhaps is the more appropriate way to say it. I've always been saying Sabin, but sometimes Carol's a little bit more hip to saying Snohomish County man as instead of Snohomish County.
Teach you that. Well, I grew up there.
So yes, and so I have so many videos of me mispronouncing that, but so I apologize to our fellow citizens out in the Snohomish County area. But yes, we have done some study of Dr. Sabine, and a very important person with respect to the development of polio vaccines. There was the legendary battle between Sabine and Jonas Salk for the which polio vaccine was going to win out. And then coming in third was Hillary Kaprowski. I can't trust any one of the three at this point. And I wish I didn't have to put it out there like that. Yes, you can see mostly what I have is just from like a pre-populated page from Wikipedia in this case. But I discovered him because he was a mentor of sorts, early mentor and peer of a Dr. Alice Moore, who I've studied researched pretty extensively. Yep, there's a photo of him. And if you go down on the page, there's actually the only one person who he's shown photographed with, I believe, is Francis Gallo. Robert Gallo, excuse me. Yep, so there's Gallo on the left and older Sabine on the right. Of course, photo doesn't mean like they're best friends, right? You get I can stand next to Ariana Grande for a photo. It doesn't mean she knows me. But that said, they were probably pretty tight. So he's a giant, and with respect to vaccine history, and again, it goes back to the days of New York University and Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City. Cancer research and vaccines, curiously, always seem to be done side by side for so many years. Specifically, I should say, vaccines for viruses. Was there anything Was there some stuff you'd like to add or elaborate on?
Yeah, there was
Carol?
a couple interesting things. I think, it calls him an American virologist here, but as I recall, when we watched that, we did a watch party with that documentary, it said he was born either in Russia or Ukraine or Poland or somewhere. That's why he did the research where he did it, because that was the area he was from. It was one of the things I remembered. So was he a paper clipper? Kaprowski probably was. I don't know about Salk. I think Salk wasn't born here either, as I recall. So
I thought he was born in Brooklyn or Bronx.
Maybe.
I could be wrong. But he went to high school in New York City. Salk did. Sabine did. Was he? So he was born in Russia, or?
Well, that's what I remember the documentary saying, and that's
Okay.
why he did his research there. And it wasn't necessarily Russia, but it might have been
Uh,
Poland or the
yep.
Ukraine or somewhere around there.
It says now
Start
Poland.
Poland. Okay.
Bialystok. Sure, I'm mispronouncing that as well.
Okay. And the other thing I remembered was at the end of that documentary, it also talked about how it wasn't just Cutter Labs that had the SV40 in it, that all of the oral ones did as well. Every single polio vaccine that anybody got did have a SV40 in it. So what that says to me is that we've already been vaccinated from monkeypox, so we don't need to take any other new ones.
If that's what monkeypox is, I'm open to it. I have no
Well,
idea
that's what they called
what it
it
is.
then. They called SV40 monkeypox
Oh,
back
did
in.
they?
Yeah, that's what it was referred to as a colloquialism, I guess. But there
Really?
were, over 40 different simian virus versions. That
Yep.
was the 40th one, and that was the one that got in the mix. Apparently, all the labs had it. And
How did they even identify? Well, first off, yeah, so there are multiple different types. I think, were they just identified back then symptomatically?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
how they identified them. And then they just numbered them when they got something that was a different version of it. Then that's
Mhm.
why we got to 40. And I think there were more than 40,
Probably.
it said in that documentary. They had a big list of all of them. Or maybe that was the one you were involved in, Mark, that woman had done a lot of research, and she had a big list of all of the SV40s, I think. I can't remember her name. She wrote the book.
She wrote the book.
One of those two books. You were in a panel discussion with Kevin McKeon and those two women.
Chris Newby is her name.
Yeah,
the book
Chris
is Bitten. Yep.
Or the other woman.
That's Johanna.
I think it was her. It was her research.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really looked to me like she had spent a lot of her career working with Jens Kuhn. She didn't say that, but it was really parallel. Her work and which viruses she was looking at and where she was in proximity. And I don't know what her age. Would she have been a mentor to him or him to her? I don't know, but I'd be real surprised that they didn't at least know each other quite well. Because she was at Hamburg University, where he spent many, many years getting all those degrees.
I think I asked her, and I forget the response. I don't want to misquote her. I forget if she said she knew of him, or
I know he started going there in the late 90s, as I recall. I don't know if she would be younger or older. I don't know.
Well, he is remarkably young. I mean, for a resume like that, I think he's 49 or 50. Yeah, it's how do you get a resume like that? I just
and he's multilingual. He's got research. Yeah. He's obviously is a native German speaker, I assume, or is he? And then I think that when he lived in Russia, one of his papers was done in Russian. When I looked at his list of what he'd published, so he was quite a linguist as well as he just must have been a brilliant guy.
So either he is, either he's really good at hiring the right people to help with create his public profile, right? Or he's just naturally brilliant. But just knowing how to get the right assistants to farm out work like that, if that's what he did, I'm not saying he did, that still shows some level of commitment and brilliance. He's an interesting. All I can say, he is in so many places. He's side by side. He was Dr. Sina Bavari was one of his referrals, or one of the people who would recommend him if you wanted to hire.
Well, they worked on a lot of things, a lot of papers together, a lot of research together. But I think Jen's big body of work was really the taxonomy. That all the viruses and the virus-like particles, and putting them into WIPO so they were available to patent if you did versions. I think that was a huge effort during that time.
That's a good observation. Yeah.
Yeah.
The taxonomy, the naming,
Mhm.
they have these ancestral trees of viruses, which
Yeah, and how
you
and
could.
just how to divide them all up, which is what, and all of that. Yeah, he's an interesting character. I dug into him a little bit more, and it looked like he didn't have a giant big house like Malone. He drove an older little car, so he doesn't have the delusions of grandeur. But then again, he was involved in a court case in Germany as a stockholder of Deutsche Bank, and his name is Kuhn. So, I think, John, you made that point. Was he part of
Yeah.
Kuhn Loeb?
I've been looking for absolute rock hard evidence and haven't
Yeah,
found
I
it.
couldn't find rock hard, but he's from the same area, and Kuhn may have been some great uncle or something. I don't think he was a direct ancestor, but there may be something there.
There's no doubt he is a key player, and a lot of these high-ranking virologists are as much, if not more, intelligence agents or diplomats as they are virologists. He has spent extensive time traveling around. I'm not taking away his technical chops, but there is a lot of diplomacy, which I think we've just scratched it, and we can smell it. Like we don't. I don't believe we really have a handle on it, but
Yeah.
we can see it, and we are unearthing things where, I think many other really great researchers out there, other channels, are doing themselves a disservice by just focusing on an evil doctors who want to kill people. It's like, I think you're missing it. It's many more layers. There's a lot more to it. I mean, go for it, embrace it. Look at this stuff. So Kuhn, he must have like 10 billion air miles. I can't believe how many places he's been.
Yeah, while he was in his 20s. Yeah, he went to South Africa. He did a whole section in Malta and Vector. He was even in a hospital in Bellevue, Washington.
Well, it's always possible that he had his own private, or his uncle had a SR-71. He could use the SR-71 to go back and forth.
Well, that's interesting because that was in the late 90s. That's when they did the big SR-71 thing to get all the viruses out of Russia, right? That was, I think, there was one earlier in the 90s and then one in the later 90s. And they brought the SR-71 out of retirement to do that operation. So, yeah, and it sits in up in Evergreen Aviation Museum. That very one is right there.
Shouldn't that be considered a little bit of a lab breach? Okay, you have these horrible things, these germs, which we're told can kill almost everyone if it's the worst thing and the worst mutation, and you're just going to put it on a plane and fly it around. Okay, I mean, planes usually don't crash, but isn't that kind of putting everyone at risk?
Yeah, especially it was an ancient old SR-71 that had already been retired. But you were the one that did the work on portable labs, that they had portable labs that they would move around with cranes and put them on airplanes.
Well, yeah, you've seen construction sites before where they have the trailers there, and a portable research facility. It seems very practical, even just like a portable facility for crime scene investigations. So it's not. It seems like a very practical application of something, but it also means that if there's some heavy-duty pathogens being developed, researched, manufactured in one of these labs, well, now the lab can pretty much go anywhere. I don't know, he probably has a little generator on board, to keep all the systems and manage the air pressure when it's disconnected from the grid. But as long as you have a plane big enough, a crane big enough, or you can put it on a flatbed, you can move these labs around.
Yeah, that wasn't the SR-71. As I recall, it only has room for 2 people, and it's huge, but that was all for fuel because it was like a horizontal rocket. So it could go really fast. It was, like a prototype for the SST.
Carol, you're muted.
Oh, I am? I'm not muted on my end.
I can hear her. Maybe the audio cut out for 2 seconds, but I think she's fine. All right, no, Carol.
Yeah.
Continue. We're good.
Okay. Well, it's interesting that the SR-71 is here in Oregon, because when I think George did the thing on Prussiagate. He did one of his Substacks on Prussiagate, and somehow or other, I don't know if I clicked on something on that page, but somehow I opened up this page that was a different Substack by Will Zoll. That's really interesting, and there were some real interesting Portland connections in some of that history of Schwab. So I don't know. Do you want to do? Do we want to get into that now or later?
Yeah, we should get into that now. Just tell the audience what it is we're going to do after we go over this. And I haven't even run this by John yet. But neighborhood news, myself, we've been having there have been some discussions about how to increase the audience size, how to take the almost overabundance of content we have, find ways to shrink it down to bring some new audience in, because I believe that there's a lot of people who would find entertainment and value, most specifically value and intrigue in what it is we do, and would like to work with us and start to become contributors possibly. So what I was thinking of doing was actually just going over some bullet points, some thinking points of what's involved in making an advertising campaign, as well as like a marketing message. How to think it through. I have like Bill Gates Sr. is just something that I just thought of. Someone within the Neighborhood News Studio group who suggested that, and just talk through, like, what do you need to think about? What type of content would we show? What things should we mention? How do we end it? So almost, if you will, it's a completely different type of show, but just talk through what would be involved in that and have some open dialogue. Why not? And I know John has been very much intrigued with doing something like this. He was mentioning the remdesivir drug.
Right.
Either way, doing 2, 3, or 4 of these, maybe packaging them up, to release at different times. But anyways, I think that would be a fun exercise. I'm not a marketing graduate, but I did have the role of a product marketing director via being a competitive analyst, I should say, for a couple of years. So I had a crash course on it, and I learned some of the keywords and the structure and so on. So we're going to mix it up a few things there. But I think for now, just to continue on, like, new content, new research, I think, Carol, you found some interesting things. So.
Yeah, well, I did want to comment on your idea. I mean, I think it's a great idea to have different lengths, so not everything isn't 2 hours, and maybe some different shorts. And it would be really cool to, if maybe you could give us some tips at some point on how to do those clips and how to make them come together. I don't know how to make clips. I don't, and I have a Mac. It probably has all this stuff in it that I'm not using and don't know how to do, or even to make copies. I just need a few little pointers, I think. So that would be really cool to, maybe we'll do that on the charrette or whatever. But yeah, to kind of follow up on Klaus, this was a focus was on Klaus Schwab and on his background. Maybe you could bring that link up, John, and we could kind of scroll. This is really long. It's 40 pages. And so I have a few notes we can kind of scroll down kind of quickly.
Is that the one on Prussiagate at Substack?
Yeah. It's called Reichswef, Part 5. So he's done a series of these, and I haven't even read the other ones, but this one is particularly focusing on Klaus and his background. And I just thought it was really timely since George was over there, and there is a lot more just eyeballs on what's going on, I think, currently. Uh, the second paragraph talks about Klaus's family was tied to nobility that maintained business partnerships dating back centuries. These families were involved with Swiss private banking, innovation during the Industrial Revolution, and the creation of the atomic bomb for the Nazis. Using the Red Cross, they also helped the Nazis wherever and whenever they could. And it goes into a little bit more about Harvard, and there's a whole section on Kissinger and the Nazis that came over here, including accused satanic pedophiles. So let's just keep going. Okay, the Klausian Command Zentral talks about Reichswehr Part 2 and 3 and 4. It gives a little background as to where this one is. So when we get up to part 5, we're really talking about the political arm and the Prussian philosophy. And he said the philosophy is quite simple. A nation must be ruled by an autocratic elite, and nothing but submissive, compliant citizenry is acceptable. Freedom, democracy, and a people-led government is a complete anathema to Prussia. One of the great Prussian thought leaders summarized it well, and there's a picture of him. It's Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Is he German or Russian? I always thought he was Russian. Anyway, he said, if you want to love, you must serve. If you want freedom, you must die. So that's part of the Prussian philosophy that goes back centuries. So that just kind of sets it up. Maybe we could.
I don't like the way he says you must die. Willing to die, okay, but if I'm going to die, well, maybe I'll trade a little freedom.
Maybe he meant that's the only way to get free of the deep state.
Well, yeah, it's to die. I think maybe he did mean that.
Well, I just wish he said willing to die as opposed to you must.
Well, he says if you want freedom, yeah, you must die. Well, I think
yeah.
Our guys didn't all die. A lot of them did, but they won. And Hegel was after the American Revolution, wasn't he? He was the Russian Revolution, so that was in the late 1800s. I don't know exactly what his time frame is, but I know a lot of the Russian Revolution was based on his words and the dialectic idea where two sides have to, juggle things out, which is obviously what we're seeing now. I loved this poster. I think I posted it to one of our things that JFK said. He exposes ruthless conspiracy in his press speech. And I'll just go ahead and read this. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It's a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. John F. Kennedy. It didn't talk about the whole health system we got going on now. You forgot that one.
Do you think he saw something like that coming? Or back then, most of the talk was about, Eisenhower mentioned the military-industrial complex. Maybe they didn't have the foresight, at least the presidents, to think that worries about germs were going to really be used more so than worries about enemy planes flying over the cities.
Yeah, I don't know when he made this speech. He was only president for 3 years, and I think Eisenhower made his speech right at the end of his presidency. So maybe when Kennedy got in, he didn't quite get it as much as he did after he was there. Because remember, the Bay of Pigs happened right away. All of a sudden, he was sort of seeing that he was surrounded by forces that he didn't like at all. The Dulles brothers, etc. So I don't know when he said this, but here we are. How many years later? 70 years later, is that right? Or I don't know, more than 50. That would have been 1960.
Yeah,
So 40 plus 20, 60, past 60 years later anyway, somewhere around there.
Yep.
Well, let's kind of scroll up to page 6. We have to skip around a little bit, but we could just scroll a little bit. Talks about the Schwabian beginnings. The Prussian origins of the U.S. Federal Reichsbank. That's interesting. Which was the Paul Warburg and the architect of the Federal Reserve. He talks about Zollern. The Hohenzollern family was the most powerful dynasty in German history, known as the Kings of Prussia, the Princess of Orange, and the Kaiser of the German Reich. And Zollern is a country within the region of Swabia. So then he's wondering where the origin of his name is. But Schwab is pretty old. And this was one thing, is when I came to Portland in the 70s, we had a very powerful woman lawyer named Schwab that came from a real old Portland family named Schwab. And then after I lived in Europe for a couple of years and came back and went to art school, one of the students was a woman whose last name was Weiss. So we'll get into the Escher Weiss, but Escher Weiss was a very prominent financial guy in the city of Portland. And sure enough, there is a Escher Weiss, there is a Sulzer here, and it made turbines and stuff. So these companies that we'll get into in a little bit that the Schwabs founded and Escher and Weiss were part of.
I just made an observation about the name Schwab. I don't know if Schwab, if there's an E at the end, if there's an extra syllable, I think it's still spelled Schwab, or should say pronounced Schwab, if it has an E in the end. And well, Klaus Schwab is using medical emergencies, pandemics, etc., as a way to promote and expand World Economic Forum power. And the person who initially developed the one medicine doctrine, which became the One Health doctrine, is a Carl Schwab at University of California, Davis. Now, I found a couple of old interviews. I need to watch them of this Carl Schwab. From what I've read, he seemed like a pretty level-headed person. And his ideas at the time seemed remarkably practical. I haven't seen anything that suggests that he's a Kissinger associate or anything of that nature. And Schwab isn't as unique a name as Kulak or Strzok.
Yeah, you have a unique name.
Yep. Hey, only like 200 or so in the U.S., which is a lot. I think there's only 130 Strzoks. So it's almost takes the sport out of doing genealogy when you have that few names. But there's more Schwabs, I believe, than that. Anyways, interesting.
It could be a different family, but there's a bunch of these names are all concentrated right here, and they're very powerful, well-connected people in the city. So I am noticing that. I'm taking note that it's interesting. Well, let's keep scrolling a little bit.
Yes. Keep
down
on
to
moving.
I want to make a really quick note here on where the family castle is located, and I've heard this before, but now it's confirmed. let's take a look at where the family castle is located. It's smack dab between Stuttgart and Zurich. And that is a very interesting area for me and my friends back in Italy. That's where some real ancient power is held.
Yeah, well, it says it's the medieval dukedom.
Right.
Smimgarian Castle.
Any stories you want to share about that, John?
Yeah, that's where they have family feuds that go on for years and years and years and years. You know, and the young baron is educated from when he's 7 years old. We hate those guys over there. So you have to learn how to ride a horse. You have to learn how to wield the sword, and you have to learn how to do some pretty nefarious things to those, you know, that bad family over there. But it's you know, it's been at least a 4-way, maybe a 5-way fight for power in that area, at least since the 1300s. And that's where a lot of the meetings, you know, during the Reagan administration, a lot of meetings were held in this area south of Stuttgart.
Well, another funny thing about Portland is it was the place that a TV show was filmed for a few years called Grimm, and it had the royals, and the big castle looked about like that. It was kind of like, it was like Grimm's fairy tales. It had these people that would mutate. I used to watch it just because I loved that it was filmed in Portland, and there was all these mossy trees, and you know, some of it was in my neighborhood, and I could recognize all the places. So I watched it with my grandson. It was really fun. So we know a lot about this, but it was about the royals having these half-breed animal people that can switch from being animals to people and had these certain powers, and the power struggles between the royals and the police around the world. There was just a lot of things that it's curious. It's curious that it was filmed here, and you know, that it was about mutated people and transformations and power. So that was another thing that I just sort of noticed. Now we're talking about Soros and Weiss. So Weiss was a very wealthy person in Portland. Was he connected with this Weiss? I don't know, but the name Escher Weiss of the company is here. And so I'm on page 3, I guess, if you want to show Soros and Weiss. It says Soros and Weiss backed the dark money group boosts un-American HR 1 election bill on May 12th, 2021. Page there. Oh, here we're getting to the Escher and Weiss.
Or was there an earlier one?
Yeah, I think it's page 2 actually. 1, 2. Oh, keep going. Yeah. No, forward. Sorry, going the wrong way. Other way. There's a picture. There we go. Soros and Weiss. Here they are, back in this time zone. But Solomon Weiss, back a little bit before that, was a Swiss billionaire. And he made his billions by selling his company Synthis to Johnson & Johnson. And then he became a charitable donor. And now he's a full-time philanthropist, donating to causes alongside George Soros. So it says that right above this election bill thing. So now he's into elections. So this is interesting. And now we can kind of scroll along.
It's funny. I think they want to give up there. It says they're encouraging lawmakers to support DC statehood and voting rights amendments. Mm-hmm. Strangely, many who support DC statehood do not support Puerto Rico or Samoan Islands statehood. It's that said, you know, residents of DC should have their vote count for the U.S. government. I can understand that part. Yeah, and the voting right. I don't know what involved in voting. I think voting rights means we need to stop Americans from voting. I think that's what it's. We in order to best suit what our Canadians need, we should let Canadians choose.
Well, I think the voting rights is also about getting all the immigrants voting rights as soon as possible too, so we have more people vote that maybe don't quite know the system and can be influenced more easily.
It's funny that you should mention that, because I've been living in Italy for 30 years, and people, whenever I talk about getting citizenship and voting, people are like, I don't know, we're still not sure about you. You've only been here 30 years.
Well, it's a good attitude. If there's a lot of people moving to Costa Rica for retirement now. I could not imagine, even if I was there paying taxes, telling the Costa Rican population who should be running their country. It's just, I don't understand that. I'm a guest. I would appreciate that. That's enough. But anyways, that's getting too far into the political spectrum here. Let's just
Yeah. Well, let's scrolling along. We're going to get to Escher Weiss founding this big company, Escher Weiss, and then they're adding Sulzer, which I think made big turbines or something like that. And
is Fanny Moser Sulzer?
Yeah, I don't. Or there's Schloss. Where are you? Oh, here we're getting into. Yeah, here's Sulzer. So that this becomes the big turbines, and then it gets into a lot of uranium stuff, and both bombs and electrical nuclear power plants, I think. Because we've had this company in Portland by the river. It's either Sulzer or Escher Weiss. I think it's Escher Weiss, and it does industrial stuff. And during this time, there was a big nuclear power plant built up the Columbia River not too far, which has since been imploded because it was leaking and being a bad power plant, and they blew it up. So it's not there anymore. But the company, Escher Weiss, is still there. So now we're talking about the rat lines. If you scroll up a little bit more.
That name Sulzer is a little bit shortened. It used to be von Sulzer, and one of the most powerful men in Turin is a von Sulzer.
So what this article is doing, or this long post, is it's going through the full, to the best of the author or the researcher here ability, trying to track down the Schwab family history.
And
to
business connections.
Klaus Schwab and the business connections, of which there appear to be many. I don't see many, supermarket clerk.
Von Sulzer is a name that they try very hard to keep out of the newspapers in Europe.
Can you repeat that? Von Sulzer?
Von Sulzer.
Well, it's a big company, Sulzer, and now you were just talking about Metabiota. We'll get there at the very end of this article, but Sulzer is the AI company that teaches AI to think and generates management models like vaccine passports. They did that in 1917, and it's probably behind Metabiota, from what we learned in the last show, where Andy and George were going.
No, I want to hear more about that, but let's
we
stay in order here.
I mean, this just gives us a lot of metadata and connects some dots, but there's a lot more digging to be done, I think. And I think John may recognize some of this. So now we're getting into the International Committee on the Red Cross, too. Issued 120,000 papers. These were so they were issuing passports, 120,000 passports until 1951. So we only got how many? 56,000 or 65,000 that were reviewed by
Those
McDuff.
are the actual paper clippers. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other ones probably went to Argentina and Africa, everywhere else. This was globally. Okay.
This is a good article.
Yeah, there's just a lot of great stuff here. I mean, we don't have time to dig in all 40 pages, but we can kind of just scroll through and get some of the idea. Now, Ravensburg is interesting. Escher, Weiss, Ravensburg, Schloss, and Bolzano, Murano are all close to each other. Oh, it's right. And Davos is right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then it talks, well, maybe it gets in more about Ravensburg was one of the first places where they really did kind of make it all white. They got rid of the Jews. They got rid of everybody in Ravensburger. And it was ethnic cleansing. And their first real good example of that. Where are you? You're on page 8. Oh, there's the Nazis in Ravensburg. I must be ahead of you. Oh, yeah. Then we're going to their German colony. Now, I'm not sure where their German... Scroll up a little bit to this New Schwabenland.
New Schwabenland.
No, go the other way. Sorry, when I say up, I mean forward. I mess you up every time. Now, here we go. Now, where is this? Can you recognize it, John?
Okay, Hoffman Garbage.
Is this by Antarctica? It said Adolf Hitler sent an expedition to Antarctica in 1939, and the colony founded was named New Swabia. So is this maybe down by the point of South America? And
good question. I'm looking for a latitude or longitude and can't find it.
Yeah, there's no numbers, but there's lots of little swastikas on the map.
Okay.
New Schwabenland. And it says that Hohenzollern, Bodmer, Escher, Weiss, Sulzer, and Schwab family names all trace their origins to Swabian lands. I think they mean in the German Swabian lands, not these islands. And they all became the kings of Prussia, princes of Orange, Kaisers. And they would remain within their homeland. So those are the ones that stayed. This was a good line. It was only fitting that the new army headquarters of this horrible invisible army we face off against today was established in the Swabian Islands where it all began.
Okay, I found it. I'm going to stop this for a second and share.
Yeah, oh, wow. It's right in the bottom. Is it that red place there? Is that where the New Schwabenland was?
Okay. Yeah, it's here in the South Antarctica.
Well, we've heard a lot about Antarctica, but I still don't quite get it.
I think this at the top is the zero meridian. So that would be, just...
So those islands are right around there where your pointer is?
Right. Southwest of South Africa.
Okay.
I just had a crazy thought. I don't know how much either of you have studied the expected magnetic pole reversal of Earth, which some have suggested is imminent. And some have taken it to the point where they think the Earth may suddenly start to reverse rotation, which, as you can imagine, going 1,000 miles an hour in one direction to suddenly going in the other direction. means your wine glasses are going to spill. But I wonder if the safest place to be in that moment will be a place as close to the center of the earth as possible. That's like, if you're at the top or at the bottom, that's the one place where you won't feel going 1,000 miles an hour in one direction to 1,000 in another direction, because the Earth, the roundness of the Earth.
The magnetic excursion is moved quite a bit already, and from what I've been able to follow about all that, is that the poles may shift a bit, you know, maybe even quite a bit, and that in Antarctica it is a continent, and apparently there are evidence of much warmer climates, and so when it does, the shift happens every 6,000 years, and or approximately, and we're way overdue for one, but the poles may not stay in the same place, I guess, is what I understand.
Well, the poles may not, but imagine, again, I have a water bottle here. I wish I had a ball, right? But if this is like the North or South Pole, right? Mm-hmm. And this is the equator here. And if it's spinning in a certain direction, if you're here and suddenly it starts to shift, your momentum is still going to carry you, along with all the oceans, just going to keep on moving, right? But if you'll notice that very center dot of the cap, it's not really moving. So as soon as that changes, this is probably the safest place to be with respect to that sudden change in movement.
Well, as long as that place stays the same, but if the pole actually moves part way around, then it would be sloshy too. You know, I don't know. There are people that have tried to figure out where the sloshes are going to slosh, but I think whatever happens sounds pretty traumatic.
It's going to be a bad day. Okay. But I was just but even if it doesn't move perfectly to the tip, right? If it's not a perfect change, you really don't want to be in the equator. That's the worst place to be, because it's probably not going to shift to the equator. It will probably shift. This is the hypothesis.
That's kind of what they're saying, though, that it's like Hawaii might be the safest place to be, because it will be the way it's expected to shift. But I don't know. Hawaii's in the middle of all the sloshy water. I would think that might be kind of dangerous. I don't know. I've just been trying
to come up with an explanation as to why the heck anyone would want to live in Antarctica. I mean, it's cool. I'd love to visit it, but man, it's just not a very hospitable place. But maybe there is a situation which would make it desirable for people in the know to be there versus on the beach. Which, of course, you have to highlight that. Well, if you think the deep state loves Obama, they made him live on Martha's Vineyard.
Poor guy.
Poor guy. He didn't get the Antarctica home. So I'm just saying.
It is curious that a lot of the political leaders all of a sudden go down there, like at 9/11. That, at least that's what we've been told, you know, and have again since. So I don't know what it is about all that.
Well, sorry to get off topic. I just thought I just had a little epiphany there, a potential epiphany. So please continue. This is so interesting.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, thanks to a little app called Fitbit, we know that there are at least 2 underground bases in Antarctica. Because Fitbit always phones home, and Fitbit says, you know, I'm running in this path on the surface of the Earth, but they're, you know, from the satellite photos, you can't see anything at that location where Fitbit says it was running, you know, several laps.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any military installations right there that are, or scientific outposts. The McMurdo's kind of on the other side of it, unless there's other countries that have outposts there. I don't know where all of them are, but my brother's one of those weird Antarctic scientists, and he's been there 30 times.
Oh.
Has he found any of the underground caves?
No, and he's not interested in that, and he doesn't think they exist, and he thinks that's all conspiracy theory. So, and he's he's been there a lot. All he sees is scientists
Wow.
from where he is, but he is on that side of it. He has gone to the South Pole a couple of times, and he has gone to another volcano. He's a geologist that's closer to the other side. So he's been all around. He's been a lot of places in Antarctica. He has a favorite volcano, and yeah, he knows a lot about it, and has sent back a lot of beautiful photos. So he's there in the Antarctic summer, but people stay all winter, and that is pretty brutal. It's I don't know, more than 60 below. I think even in the summer it can get to be 30 below when the sun's out, and he feels that's warm. But there's also fumaroles and stuff. There's, these volcanoes are active, so there's warmth that melts things, and there are these ice caves, and there's all kinds of interesting places.
Nazis and nuclear Ravensburg. This sounds interesting.
Yeah, this is interesting. Now we're back to Escher Weiss again. And Ravensburg is the town he grew up, has a grisly history of Jewish persecution dating back to the 15th century. Now, I knew there were pogroms going way back to the 15th century, but I guess that's where it was. With the direct approval of the Holy Roman Empire, Sigismund, or Emperor, Margrave of Brandenburg, laid the foundations for the future kings of Prussia. Throughout the next few centuries, there were several pogroms against the Jews in Ravensburg. By the time Hitler took power in 1933, there were very few Jews left in the town. Any Jews that did remain had their properties forcibly sold and were deported to Schloessenhausen concentration camp. If the Nazis were in power, Ravensburg became a model town for the Aryanization of Germany. And then it goes into the horrific Nazi crimes. And on January 1st, 1934, the law for the prevention of hereditary diseases came into force in Nazi Germany, meaning people with diagnosed illnesses such as dementia, schizophrenia, epilepsy, hereditary deafness, and various other mental disorders could be legally forcibly sterilized. In the Ravensburg City Hospital, today called Heiliggeist Hospital, forced sterilizations were carried out beginning in April 1934. By 1936, sterilization was the most performed medical procedure in the municipal hospital.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can see what they were trying to do at the WHO was pass that same law, basically, that they could, except globally, globally, once there was something determined that it would hurt humanity, they could just lock us down.
It's not really thinking it through, though. If they wanted to do the Aryanization, if they wanted to, populate Germany with more and more white Germans, why take someone who happens to be born deaf and deprive them of the ability to have children? I mean, wouldn't you want like all hands on deck? No, I don't. Sorry to that phrase here, but
yeah, but that was the thinking of the time. The idea of eugenics, I think, was to improve the genetics of the human race. So they thought all those things were genetic. And they didn't know about epigenetics, and maybe they still don't know about epigenetics, that you can turn things off and on. So they just said, well, if we just get rid of the undesirables, then that will thereby improve the human race to this wonderful situation. And then we're getting into the vaccine passports in 1917. And this is where, we were talking a little bit about Metabiota and the vaccine passports now, but this is what they did in 1917. Oh, wait, first of all, we're about large turbine technology was Escher Weiss, yeah. And they were also intimately involved in much more sinister projects happening behind the scenes, which, if completed, would have changed the outcome of World War II.
Now, earlier it says the not since 1917 series. Does that mean they started the vaccine passports in 1917, which is curious? That's a year before the Spanish flu, or is that just a reference to a group?
That's what I mean. I think later on we'll get into this, but what my notes say that in 1917 was when the original vaccine passport was made by the company called Entrust Company, which was run by a guy named Quant, Quandt, who I think now runs a huge company that does, quant investing, doing, just running numbers and investing on the numbers. And Goebbels was the other partner in the vaccine passport company. And that was owned originally by Sulzer. And it sounds like the AI part of it has been transferred to Metabiota as far as running the numbers. And, Andy was talking about Metabiota and that how they could predict all the waves and therefore make the investments to, it's all based on modeling is the problem. Computer modeling is how AI is programmed to have an outcome. So you program the outcome and then everything runs to that outcome. Like, for instance, you program that we don't want vaccine hesitancy. So you put that program in, and so it knocks out anybody that's doing anything that fits in to their category by the way they define it.
Yeah, just a quick tangent from that, or just to build on that. Yes, it is about the modeling and making projections and weighing risk, going through exercises. The way these models are also used, though, the way these companies that make these predictions are being used, though, is they're trying to get the models seen as extremely reliable. Of course, they should be reliable, but the reason why that's being done is then models can be used to create narratives and drive policy.
Exactly.
Let's just say, I don't know, I'm trying to think of some crazy scenario here. They wanted to, there was some psychopath wants to vaccinate everyone in Portugal against, hamster pox or something like that, right? But there's no hamster pox. Just making something up in Portugal. So you can have Metabiota say, our predictions, our highly reliable predictions show that there's a very high chance of hamster pox breaking out in Portugal. So since we're so reliable, the only thing to do is, first of all, use the WHO to use their Emergency Powers Act, and then to start injecting people with the hamster pox vaccine, even if there is none. So you can drive policy. You could drive policy if it's if these analytics, if the output of these predictions are seen as highly reliable and somewhat indisputable. Now, hypothetically, or it would be great if we had the ability to make such amazing predictions so that we could make intelligent decisions on it. But I suspect, for example, Metabiota had no idea monkeypox breakout was going to happen. None. Zero. There's a whole bunch of things. They missed the number of people who have been dealing with bad medical procedures. They completely missed a few 100,000 Americans dying of drug overdoses. They seem to have missed an awful lot. What I'm trying to say. But they conveniently get SARS-CoV-2 down to the week, but they can't actually explain how it could have come from anywhere but bat soup. So I suspect that it's a load of baloney now.
The only way you
it's
could
used
do
to drive
that
policy
is to base it on assumptions. You have to make assumptions and the outcome is an assumption too. So you have assumptions building on assumptions. Because I remember at the beginning of all this, there were certain words you couldn't say, like vitamin C. If you said vitamin C, you got taken down. Or if you said vaccination, you got taken down. I mean, it's like somehow they measured what the likelihood of this conversation is, and they decided, in order to not have this is making vaccine hesitancy. Anybody that says vitamin C goes into this bucket, and then therefore it makes another assumption about that. So that's, I think, how things got so whacked out. That it's absurd, you know. It's just absurd.
That's okay. Excellent.
I'd like to take 1 minute to comment on a couple of things that Carol said yesterday. Here I'm going to post again that picture, the picture of the people standing in front of what looks like a some kind of administrative building. There is a lot going on here, and not necessarily in the photo, but what's behind the photo. Because after the First World War, you had, besides all the destruction, you had a lot of suffering all over the place, and people were trying to come up with new methods of capitalism, new methods of socialism, left and right. There were new parties popping up all over Europe, every week. So by 1928, in most parts of Germany, there was real hunger. I mean, people were pulling their hair out, trying to find a way to give their hungry kids some scrap of bread to eat. And so this debate over is socialism is good, we know, but we just got to change this. No, capitalism is good, but we just need to change that. And George Orwell dives into this deeply. This debate is raging like a wildfire. And at the same time, you have a few people about halfway between Stuttgart and Zurich who really think that they should be coming up with the solution, and it's genetics-based or some kind of, eugenics-based remedy. And so they are going to capitalize. They're going to try and infiltrate every one of these 12 new parties that pops up in Germany so that they can get their medical personnel in there. So I'm going to bet that at least 20% of the people in this photo are doctors. Okay, let's go on.
Okay, we're up to like page 13 now. And then we're up to where Escher Weiss is getting into producing the atomic bomb for the Nazis. And so they've been engineering these big turbines, 14,500 horsepower turbines for Norsk. Oh, heavy water. They're making plutonium, and they need the heavy water. I was interested in that. I always wondered what heavy water was. And when I started researching all of the liquid crystal structured water, heavy water is a hydrogen isotope called deutonium. Is that right? Anyway,
deuterium, I think.
Deuterium, yeah. So it's D2O instead of H2O. And I did notice that D2O is starting to come up in the news. And it's not called heavy water, it's called D2O. And there's some research being done on it again now. So I just happened to take note of that. I think it's a dot. It's a dot to note, and we'll figure out what they're doing with D2. But they did use it. They needed it for, I think, the enrichment process. But maybe it was actually for the bomb itself. I don't know.
It was for the enrichment, and at some point it should probably. I don't know if this article mentions IG Farben.
No.
And some of the what do they call it? The Buna. I know I have that name wrong. The synthetic rubber factories, which were set up throughout in some places in Germany. The synthetic rubber factories consumed high levels of electrical power. But in reality, if you went behind the closed doors, they were using that electrical power to enrich uranium.
Yeah. I remember that story. I think you read it to us, Mark, about the
Yeah.
submarine. Yeah, that was really interesting. I think I've got that on my hard drive somewhere on PDF. Okay, so, and this article really says that they weren't able to make the weapon, but what it looks
Huh.
like from what the research you have is that really they were pretty dang close. They just brought it over here and finished it up, that we were further away than they were. In terms of, like the Hanford reactor was, what did you say? It made a teaspoon or a tablespoon of enriched plutonium, whereas the stuff that came over in the submarine was quite a bit, as I recall.
Yeah. So yeah, for those who are hearing this for the first time, there is a submarine that was packed with supposedly all of the enriched uranium that was produced by Germany during World War II. So as the leadership was faltering in one of their last few weeks, they took one of their last few remaining submarines and just crammed all of this enriched uranium onto the submarine and sent it on a one-way mission. Now, some people believe, now they had a couple of Japanese people on there. It was believed that Germany was hoping to get that material to Japan, but of course, the U.S. Navy intercepted it and was able to rescue the uranium and use it for the bomb. That most of a certain percentage of the uranium that the United States used for the 2 nuclear blasts came from that submarine. However, there's so much confidential about that topic that I sometimes wonder if it's just a fictional story to describe where several hundred pounds of enriched uranium came from. But who knows?
Here's an interesting paragraph about the Red Cross and human shields that is still going on today. I think that the truth about Ravensburg was far more obvious. They're trying to say that it was strategically of no relevance, and that's why it wasn't bombed. But it said the main deterrent in bombing Ravensburg was its large logistical centers that were housing critical medical and aid supplies. The Swiss Red Cross placed their equipment throughout the town, thereby protecting it from the Allied forces' air raids, effectively providing a similar protection to that of a human shield. So we're still seeing that happen. And now we're getting into the passports. Okay. At the same time as these bombing raids were taking place, efforts were underway to evacuate Nazi war criminals from Europe to Argentina. As we've shown previously, the passports were arranged by the International Committee of the Red Cross, which was the ICRC. And the man, okay. So the Red Cross company would go into much more ambitious projects, which would eventually catch the eye of Henry Kissinger. Kissinger would seek to recruit a young man who'd grown up within the culture of Escher Weiss and who knew its global network of nuclear clients. This man was Klaus Schwab. Then it gets into the transnuclear network and how he went to school at Harvard. Klaus went to school at Harvard and got to know Henry Kissinger.
Carol, are you trying to tell us that Henry Kissinger picked up Klaus Schwab within the context of atomic weapons?
That's what it looks like. But he picked him out, or maybe they already knew that ahead of time. I mean, there's a lot of... That was 1967.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Wow.
So they became good friends. They are a lifetime of good friends. We do know that. Okay, we got a long way to go, so we got to keep going here.
Well, I heard from somebody in Cambridge that Klaus Schwab was Kissinger's European protege.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. And he came to Harvard to get an education by him. So he already knew him. That's what it looks like. He's already picked out.
Mm. That's what Klaus definitely says. I believe Klaus has said that as well. The question is, does Henry Kissinger believe that, or if it's all for optics? I don't know. Anyway, continue.
Well, I'm kind of scrolling. We're only up to page 17, so I'm
Yeah.
going to kind of move along here. The nuclear netherworlds. But now we're into Sulzer Escher Weiss. So we're doing nuclear stuff and making these big turbines and pumps, great big pumps. That's kind of what they do. And the nuclear netherworlds. So they're getting, and I think when it says netherworlds, this is when this whole industry kind of goes underground and does the stuff that George has been looking at, you know, all the trading of the
drugs for weapons plays.
Yeah, the drugs for weapons place, and especially trading it to the evil empires, you know, because it's not regulated. Using those countries to really, like Iran and North Korea, to really develop some of this stuff. Here we are, South African nuclear. Yeah, I'm kind of scrolling a little faster than you, John.
Okay.
Nuclear Watergate. Oh, here's a German uranium broker that's called Nukem. That's the name of the company or the name of the person. Okay, now we're getting into the Club of Davos, early patrons of the Club of Davos. And this is 1971. Oh, this is interesting. We're getting into a book. So Klaus Schwab's close friend, Martin Bodmer, was able to attend the first symposium. That's that symposium there. European Management Forum is what it was called. Bodmer's appointment to vice president of the International Committee of the Red Cross occurred just after the ICRC raided the escape of the Nazi war criminals, avoiding the annihilation of Ravensburg by stockpiling the Red Cross supplies. Despite the significant influence afforded by his role at the ICRC, one of his lesser-known legacies was his bi-monthly publication from 1930 to 43, which was named Corona. Yeah.
Capital HM.
Now, yeah, this is like more of those funny coincidences that keep turning up, you know? They're just all over the place.
Backing up for just a second, March 1971 is also the founding of the Trilateral Commission by David Rockefeller and his sidekick, Brzezinski.
Well, that's what George was just talking about today, was how much of the property of where he was walking around was owned by the Rockefellers over there. You know, like we wouldn't have known that except he was walking around over there. But this says the original World Economic Forum was immediately supported by Harvard.
Imagine my shock.
And April 1972 is when all the signatures were made on the Biological Weapons Convention.
Yeah, I mean, you got to wonder about the Red Cross.
Yeah.
That, the whole thing about the Red Cross blood supply, getting people infected with HIV and the lawsuit about that was in Portland too. George has talked about that. That was the Portland Red Cross. It got in bad trouble for injecting people with HIV. So and the radiation, all the radiation that they did for the experimentation. Developing a European corporate strategy. Okay. Herman Abs. They're talking about Herman Abs to the formation of the European Union and the reconstitution of Deutsche Bank that will require its own Prussiagate article. So he doesn't go into it. But in short, Abs was the #1 commercial banker for the Nazis in 1935. He was a partner in a private bank, which included Hitler as a client. By 1937, he was nominated to the managing board of Deutsche Bank, and by 1942, he held 40 directorships, including a seat on the board of the directors of IG Farben. And
Which
then they
page
talk
are you
about
on now?
Benelli. Yeah, I'm up to 1973 now. The Davos Convention. A little further, the manifesto and the convention. The Davos Manifesto captured the philosophy of the Reichswef, which simultaneously embraced the fascist principles of big government with Marxism. Bringing these two weaponized philosophies together would be the mainstay of Klaus Schwab's vision and the key to the Prussian ideology achieving a global reach. Since fascism and communism were two fingers attached to the hand of Prussia, Klaus Schwab was now openly exposing where his loyalty was placed. It seems like both the fingers are involved. They don't really see them as they're just part of the hand, the dark hand. It's got 3 other fingers too. This was confirmed in the 1974 forum when Klaus invited socialist Brazilian Archbishop Dom Helder Camara. Dom's address to the forum was quite simply an explanation of Kissinger's vision for a doomed Western civilization and endorsing the communist principles for the world. Digging into Cameron's history, it was a pro-Nazi militant. And then he mentioned some other high Catholic people. His pro-Nazi convictions were so deep, he was ordained a priest wearing the Integrist militia's uniform under his cassock, the ill-famed green shirt. In 1946, Archbishop of Rio de Janeiro wanted to make him auxiliary bishop, but the Holy See refused because of his previous pro-Nazi militancy. So we're seeing the Nazis in the Catholic hierarchy here, especially in South America, which we certainly saw a lot of that in South America, all that brutality going on in the 80s and the 70s, probably into the 90s. Okay, now we're getting into Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. And, the diamonds. I think, this is about the Angola diamonds. Wasn't George just tweeting about the Angola diamonds?
Well, a few weeks ago.
I don't know.
Bacosa was one of the most atrocious, murderous dictators of all time, especially when it came to children. This is terrible. We'll just sort of skip over that. Ickiness. In 1977, Klaus began to name the attendees of the Reichswaf as part of the Davos Club. 2 years later, Edward Heath chaired the event and was considered the life of the party. Read carefully what Teddy Heath was supporting while proudly showing off his musical talent. This guy gets arrested for pedophilia, so I'll just shorten that story a little bit. There he is, Edward Heath. Keep going, and there's a picture of him kind of being arrested. The satanic cult of Heath. Yeah,
what a face.
Oh, geez, yeah. I mean, he just needs pointier teeth, and there you go. It's pretty awful. Okay, we're going into all the yuckiness of the... We'll skip through that. George doesn't like us to talk about that.
Yeah, some of it gets
there.
overly embellished.
Now we're getting into China, the pivot to China. We're in late 78. I'm on page 35. I think I'm a little ahead of you. So Kissinger goes to China in the late 70s and makes that big connection there. Special economic zone. So the Chinese people who suffered so many decades of famine, poverty, and needless death were now scrambling to these new economic zones for an opportunity to work their way out of a miserable existence. And they worked really hard. We know that. They were paid less than $1 a day. And so we moved our capitalism over to China and emptied out all of our factories in exchange for Chinese labor. And also, a lot of the science went to China too. They have a big university system. They've always understood the value of education for thousands of years. So, Klaus, did you want to say something? Go ahead, Mark.
I was gonna say, so wrapping up this part, how is this best summarized? Why Klaus Schwab? Why the World Economic Forum?
Well, we got a couple more pages, and we'll get to a really nice summary at the end.
Okay.
And it brings us back full circle to our friend, what's his name? Yuval. So, so a big celebration. Now we're on page 37. In the final words of the opening remarks, explain in plain language what he believed lay ahead for the West. I think this is Kissinger speaking. And there is a dilution of confidence in classic economic models, a challenge to the capitalist system, but also a demoralization of the socialist systems, which nowhere have produced the satisfaction of human personality. All of these changes are global and would make ours a period of turmoil, even apart from any specific challenges that we face. And so then we have a picture of Klaus, Kissinger, and Ted Heath being really excited about their accomplishment and the bright future that lay ahead, ... for Prussia. So the order out of chaos is really the Prussian order out of chaos. And we have a little picture. What page are you on? You're on 39. I think I'm a little ahead of you. I'm at the one where the Schwabian branch, Frederick the Great and Karl. So let's see, I think you're ahead of me. Yeah, you're way ahead. Let's back up a little bit. Whether it was the 30-year war, I think I'm on page 37. There's not the end of page 37. Whether it was the 30 Years' War, the French Revolution, multiple communist revolutions, or the Unification Wars, World Wars I and II, the Weimar hyperinflation, and every other crisis, the Hohenzollern were on hand to expand their power base at every turn. Were these opportunities simply coincidences? At what point do the number of coincidences become mathematically impossible? Or were the Hohenzollerns using a formula? To answer that question, we must return to Swabia, where the other princely families remained while the Hohenzollerns pursued world domination. We must also look to the bank that these families all partnered with at some point throughout the last 270 years. That was the Bank of Ron and Bodmer. So Ron and Bodmer's philosophy regarding the crises, this is a big picture. It says, history has brought us many crises. We have used them and learned from them. We're still hearing, never let a good crisis go to waste. That's right where we are here. So they had a knack for using the crises throughout history, learning from them, using them to expand their power. And this ongoing expansion of power is the entire premise of Prussiagate. We assert that the horrible invisible enemy described by President Trump is Prussia, and its visible army today is the Reichswehr. That's the Reichswef. How does one use a crisis? The only one, this would be to gain knowledge that would be advantageous for a future crisis. So taking full advantage of a global crisis really requires a foreknowledge of an event and also suggests that certain preparation can be made in order to take advantage of another's pending doom.
Okay, so what I'm reading here, Carol, is that the author is saying coronavirus, or the op known as COVID-19, was a means to calibrate their tools for controlling the dissemination of knowledge or belief systems in general, and for calibrating their tools for like a Steve Bannon, to control how they implement, how they contain the spread of authentic knowledge.
Right. That's exactly right. And so then it says, let's have a look at what Sulzer is up to these days. The Sulzer solution and technical benefits, teaching AI to think, reducing incidences and MTTR, whatever that is, greatly improving service levels. So it's really all about this AI-run world that kills the people that want freedom and trains the workers to do what they want. Could it be that artificial intelligence is being used to generate management models for member companies of the Reichswehr? When a crisis arrives, these companies have a template which they operate in lockstep. The crisis is used to promote the agenda of Prussia, which entails a complete technological enslavement of humanity and the deprivation of inalienable rights. The vaccine passport apps are about to be everywhere. It could get complicated. This is a story from CNN. And then it talks about this vaccine passport company in trust. The goal being, congratulations, you are now hackable animals. Yuval Noah Harari. So then he has a conclusion. We don't have to go through the whole conclusion. I know, Mark, you've got your remdesivir stuff. I want to leave some time for that. Sorry to take this all up, but it is kind of interesting.
I'm sorry, did I lose you?
No, I'm here. I was just kind of concluding with Yuval. Our friend Yuval Noah Harari.
Harari.
Now that we're hackable animals. So, I mean, he does say, we have to, this is what we're up against, I think, in just a quick conclusion. There you go.
Well, does the vaccine passport make us hackable itself?
No, I think what makes us hackable is the vaccine. That whole the whole thing where you can monitor where everybody is. You've got stuff in you that can be tracked. It gives you biometrics up to the satellite in the sky. All of that. That's what makes us hackable. Is we're controllable, and that we're controllable by the vaccine passport. Our money. They can turn off our money. They can turn off your telephone. They can do, they can just do it all by AI. They don't even have to do it to somebody. It's all done automatically. Imagine that.
So if
what could go wrong?
If their profiting has always been using crisis, or you don't need to predict the future 1,000 years in advance. All you need to do is be able to predict one more move than your opponent. So as long as they're one move ahead, you're always going to be ahead. Now, it appears as though they have seen that the future is genetics. The future is resetting all of society around this endless science project, which is going to mean different currencies, different ownership models, more biosurveillance, more measuring, more monitoring, more passports, more everything. Everything down to the food is literally molecularly going to be monitored, tracked, engineered, etc. And with that future, with that vision of a future, that's where they're going to be or have been investing everywhere. And that's pretty much exactly what it is. And then the World Economic Forum, it sort of provides a platform to make sure that things play out as you'd like. You want to make sure that your favored people get the contracts that they deserve, that things fall into order as you projected. So they can predict the future, and then they can also be part of making sure that the future comes to pass as close to their investment as possible. And that makes a lot of sense to me. That's more or less what we're seeing. The AI stuff. Yes.
It is what we're seeing, but I think that they're not taking everything into account. I think when you look at what our biome is, it is a much more powerful supercomputer just in a couple of cells than is in the whole world. And I think when Kurzweil did his singularity projections, they didn't understand how deep that fractality that goes, and every time they go down another notch, it's just, multiplies by exponentially the complexity of what we already have going on for us. So we have more within our skin than mechanically exists today on the face of the earth by a lot. And so that's the biggest mistake that they made, is not really seeing that we have an infinite capacity for intelligence and for connectivity that is never going to exist in their plan. So they can take advantages, but as soon as we can see them, we can avoid it. And that's, George has been showing us that happens. He said, okay, here's the pinch point. Here's this Lauter pen pinch point. Let's avoid that, and people avoid it and it doesn't happen. So that's what we're doing.
And with that type of potential power available to whoever sits on top of this ladder, if you will, I can't believe that every nation in the world is just going to kick back and accept being number two to a couple of dudes in Prussia. So at some point, it would make sense for there to be regional powers that try to maybe gently push back and try to manipulate things so that they can get maybe one more rung up. As opposed to just letting Mr. Schwab and whoever else are his associates at the World Economic Forum pull this whole thing off. And that's probably what we see in something like Ukraine, right? It's not heroes versus bad guys. These are proxy wars, and it's a collision point between different parts of the world, which are probably, I'm sure the leaders at the top of Russia and China see this future also. China's already implemented a lot of it. Its social credit scores and so on, which, behind the scenes is probably more about biosurveillance and trying to get a leg up on what they see the U.S. and World Economic Forum and other, so on are going to be implementing. It's not that they really care. If what movie you go to see, no one really has time for that. That's just a nice little cover story. Of course, it does protect the party in power, but yeah.
It's all predicated on controlling the money system, though, and without that, then the power can go back to the localities, to the people. If we can get control of local money, state money, national money, and even wooden nickels that work at your local farmers market, then this whole passport surveillance stuff doesn't have to be the only possibility.
Yeah, and they need to consolidate the money system into some type of digital currency that is part of that is an unrecognized component of this. It does provide a way to track someone's mental state, their decision making. It is a very valuable tool. The digital currency part, of course, yeah. Is it about making sure you tax everyone on all their smaller transactions? It's part of it, but it provides a great level of insight, which would be hard to capture otherwise.
I think that's how the Nazis were successful too. I mean, they were tracking everything, and they were knowing who the dissidents were and funneling them into the concentration camps, and that's the mechanism for control. So economically, that's what we can't let happen, is the economic control that is planned based on the vaccine passports. I mean, that's what we're fighting for, and letting people know where we're going and who's controlling it, by shining a light on what's happening. Hopefully that'll change things. That's the whole point.
Agreed. Any more comments on this, John? Have you back?
No, I was looking in the chat, and one of the subscribers talks about that her mortgage company will not accept payments with a credit card. So the move to digital currency, I think, I see this even more in Milan. We have the push towards global currency of some kind is very big, and we are going to have to fight hard with things like Carol mentioned before, Ithaca hours, local currencies, things like that.
Correct. And they're going to say, oh, well, this way, you don't have people touching their dirty currencies, right? Money spreads germs.
Money spreads Ebola.
Money spreads Schwabian.
Okay, so let's see. So for the other part of the program, we're a little short of time here, but I'm just gonna just read through some of the notes I had here. So the shows that a lot of the shows that Neighborhood News is currently airing, and a lot of the programs that I've built, or episodes are built on my own independent channel, are long format shows. They require or mandate a lot of knowledge beforehand, a high level of attention, and this means they can be difficult to consume for a general audience that is just wants, or I should say, a wider audience that wants more news bites, more easier things that they can digest and repeat. I had a vision for a while that perhaps there would come along again, I've never had a discussion with this person, but people like an Amazing Grace, who would, really graceful, excuse me, Amazing Grace, really graceful, who would see that, wow, there's a lot of content here, and they would use their production capabilities to sort of simplify it, but it hasn't really happened, and I'm not sure why. So we need to build more awareness of the content that we have, because as solid as much of the research is, as narrative bursting, crushing as most of it is, it's not getting enough visibility. So we don't want to necessarily, change our value add by just regurgitating and doing cute little videos. We are what we are. We do a lot of deep analysis, research, data archival. George Webb right now on the road in Europe, collecting information firsthand. I'd like to do more of that myself as life evolves. And it's still never going to have an audience of necessarily millions of people, but it should have and we do have the loyal audience. It's small, but how can we build that? Because I know there are thousands of more people that would find this awesome if they just knew it existed, or if they could get up to speed a little bit. So what's been the challenge that was put before me, and I had already thought that this was going to be needed at some point, is we need to have more, not necessarily 1 minute, but like 3, 5, 10-minute videos. And it's really, it's not necessarily full stories, but they're just sort of to get people aware of the program. It's a little bit like of an advertisement, right? It will give people some value, but also hopefully pull them into discovering, Neighborhood News Studio. Of course, I personally also want Housatonic Live brand to get a couple of views. I've never, and I had to pick up some skills when I became a product marketing director at Datto Corporation to build up some of these programs. There's i7marketing.com. They have a good blog, just the high levels, developing our objective, understanding our target audience more. We can describe ourselves, but who is the target audience? Is it going to be someone who's probably watching CNN today? Maybe not. And not necessarily changing what we're doing, but to really, embrace it and then know how to communicate that out there, and also do a better job at whatever these little productions are going to be. They're going to have to be at places where people find them. It's going to have to be a Twitter campaign of sorts. YouTube, of course, the YouTube videos are going to be subject to heavy scrutiny. So, use Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, every other channel, Brighteon, everything that you can think of where a video will stick. And then even if we do get out there and have a way to get some people to discover the network, where do they start? That's the other thing. At the end of every advertisement, every product marketing campaign, there's something called, the call to action, the CTA, and that is, you click here, you call this person, whatever, right? Those are typical things to do with when you're selling something. But in this case, we just want them to, subscribe to the Rumble channel, or whatever it is that is the preferred delivery vehicle. It takes a certain amount of time. It actually takes longer to make short videos, especially if it's new research, than it is to take longer videos. When I was at NetApp Corporation, we typically, a good 1 minute video, like extremely highly produced. Something it could take a week to make. So the shorter and shorter it gets, the more production you put into it, the longer it actually takes to produce. And that can be challenging for us because we're always driven by trying to learn something else ourselves and continuing to do research. So it almost requires a pause in research activities. But so the first thing is how would we even start off? Some of these videos. Who is that audience? I see. I have a couple of other notes here. This was the something called Clip Champ. I just threw away my product marketing certification guide. It's like 3 weeks ago. I was like, I'm never going to use this thing. And then I woke up today like, oh man, I wish I had kept that thing. So we need to work on our awareness, continuing to build up the website, and once people do get that far, how are we, we can't just throw them directly into the fire. There actually sometimes needs to be a little bit of a learning curve. Watch this next video, right? Which is maybe going to be like a 1 hour piece to like sort of get up to speed. And at that point, now you're actually expecting people to invest a whole lot more of their time. So they need to be pretty compelled. And that's so these shorter videos they can't just be, let's just give you 20 facts. It is also a little bit of a sales campaign. Like, why would you want to spend your time, watching a longer video or listening to, George Webb, myself, Carol, Peter Duke, whoever else is on the program, talk for 6 hours. That's a huge investment. And I know the audience is out there. I know there's people who would want to be part of this, but trying to, package that together, is something that we need to be thinking about. And on a journalist calls are a good time to be putting out ideas for the Patreon supporters of Neighborhood News Studio about how this stuff would work. Now, the other thing is the delivery of this content. That's where we also hit Neighborhood News Studio hits a little bit of a snag where sometimes the broadcast goes to the site, but some people will watch it on Odyssey, some people watch it on Rumble. YouTube is great for McDuff's show, John O'Loughlin's show, but the other programs can't be there. So it needs to be there needs to be some sort of consistent experience, and also a way for the community to be consistent based upon whichever platform people are logging into chat. There's a couple of other networks out there that have also run into this and dealing with a lot of the same censorship issues. So we're going to be, over the next few weeks, having more and more discussions about this at Neighborhood News Studio. Let's see here. So what I was really hoping to do today, and I don't think we're having enough time to do it, so maybe we'll do it in another show, is to actually just start bouncing off ideas about, how do we take, these facts? How would we, what would we say when in a campaign like this, like a short video campaign, and then just sort of like do a design on the fly. But I think we'll do that. Maybe we'll do that in our next show. I don't know. But that's kind of what I was thinking. I was thinking of maybe actually crowdsourcing like a marketing campaign, hearing what the people in the chat liked, what they didn't like, how to maybe come up with some ideas to bait the larger audience. What have your challenges have been? Not you and John specifically, but in the audience and accessing the information. What has worked for you as far as making things more easily accessible and digestible for you. That's kind of the idea I had for today. But I think we're going to need a longer show to pull that stuff. Like, I mean, Bill Gates Senior, for example. These are just to rip off a few points, right? Show after show after show out there, whether it was InfoWars or Polly or whoever else, just talks endlessly about Bill Gates, endlessly, with very little understanding of who Bill Gates Sr. is. and how him, Microsoft, are you can just tie that. You can tie so much of history over the last 50, 60, 70 years together by getting away from, Bill Gates as a crazy person, to going back a little bit further into history, and then immediately goes up to current events. The whole topic of genetic research, humanized mice. Where do those cell tissues come from? University of Washington. Who are regents there? Bill Gates' father, Bill Gates' mother, Don L. Thomas, Dr. Don L. Thomas, Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Institute, talking about the value of genetic research, finding ways to do that through bone marrow transplants, non-consensual medical experimentation that happened there, him working with Bill Gates' father, the fact that, as George Webb has been expressing lately, we started a path of what warfare is completely changing decades ago, but we never really appreciated it. It was seen in the 1980s that warfare as we knew it was going to change. There were never going to be any more, 20-year, or whatever, World War II style events. We had computers, we had missiles. Press a button, someplace disappears on the other side of the planet. It wasn't balanced anymore, and out of that effort, we see one of the main, in addition to many neoconservatives being part of that future security environment planning, as well as Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger, but also the bacteriologists and Dr. Thomas Rona, whose wife introduced Gary Kildall and Bill Gates in the mid-1960s, actually 1967. These things are not crazy coincidences. Bill Gates Sr.'s best friend was Daniel Evans, who was almost vice president of the United States. The role went to Nelson Rockefeller instead, who I believe was assassinated in 1979. Microsoft. What is Microsoft known for? Viruses. Like unlike any other computer program or operating system ever created. It's almost designed to pass on viruses. Now, all right, well, why haven't they ever been able to lick that problem? I don't understand. And they call them viruses. And what are they doing in all this genetic research? They're studying viruses. And then what's Bill Gates Jr.'s claim to fame? Vaccines for viruses. And you can see the propaganda, or the way viruses are described in newspapers change slowly. From 1918, you're like, God, these things are interesting. They might be involved in illness, to, by 1990, some scientists were actually saying all illnesses are caused by viruses. Cancer is caused by viruses. Death is caused by viruses. Everything is a virus. If a bacteria is a problem, it's only because you have a virus. Bacterial pneumonia? The bacteria just magically appeared because you got a virus. And no one's pushed back on that. Viruses are a gateway to the human genome. So there's all of these misunderstandings that, again, so I just talked there for a few minutes, but it wasn't really consistent, and that probably wouldn't have resonated with someone who was only thinking, oh, Bill Gates wants to get richer and he wants to vaccinate people to kill people, and that's it. So,
that's a good jumping off point, Mark, because even after 19 years of research, I was blown away by the fact once I got to Cambridge physically and I saw that Microsoft NERD, New England Research and Development, had on staff 30 biologists, not just biologists, virologists. And I started to, wait a minute, how come, why does a software company, a software company that started in a garage in Redmond, have 30 virologists working for it? That didn't make sense. So that is a good jumping off point for newbies.
and virologists. Not so many bacteriologists. It's always virologists. And virologists are often dual majored with geneticists. It is what it is. And that's what runs all of our health institutes right now. And that is, I'm sure, if you dug in to some of the backstories behind many of the scientists in that long article that Carol was going through with us, you'll find that more of those medical professionals were scientists and geneticists wanting to boil down the human condition to a mathematical formula. Than a more complex, aggregation of systems, united by some undefinable spirituality. And that's, I think more physicians realize that there's more to the human body than just a mathematical formula. So you have that's another big part of the culture war. But nonetheless, taking it back up, and of course you could always throw the crazy cherry on top. Like, isn't it also kind of strange that serial killer Ted Bundy was probably at the Gates Senior house for fundraising in the 1970s? Oh, and Warren Buffett, was a family friend before Bill Gates even graduated college. Stop looking at Bill Gates. Just look at his father. Look at all of the other networks, these companies, and these are the things that we get into at Neighborhood News and Housatonic Live, etc. So that needs to be thought about. How do you get people to listen? What's the first one or two sentences? How do you present that information? Appreciation that it takes a lot of time to put all of those video clips together in an interesting way. You obviously want this thing completely pre-narrated. No thinking. It has to flow, right, be impactful. And then you can't just say, well, start watching the videos, because some people may not see it at first. It may take a while for them to understand it, to get on board. So that is another thing that needs to be thought of as well. Anyways, I know that there's a unique value here. I know there's a lot of people who will find it captivating and will become longtime viewers and listeners. The question is, if they already know this is something what they want, how to get them here, or maybe they don't even know something like this is possible, and once they try it, they will become supporters of the program, listeners, fans, etc. Anyways, I just threw a bunch of thoughts out there, and Carol has a little bit of a marketing background too. And we're going to try to continue to build these things, take these this potpourri of skills that we have and build towards the goal, which I said, and we're actually going to try to crowdsource a little bit through the supporters of the community. Taglines, phrases, etc., on how to build this.
I think that's a great idea, Mark, and it's something we can all use to get targeted smaller messages. But one of the things that I was thinking about, I mean, we have all this history of how did we get here, and we're making an assumption too, I think, like often these big guys did, that the human condition includes wars. But Kennedy said, how do we prepare for peace? And I think that's a question I'd like to ask and have that be part of what we're looking at. Maybe these endless wars are just a figment of our imagination, or we're being manipulated. I mean, I think that's what we're trying to point out. But maybe we can clarify that idea that there is something after the endless wars and the silent weapons for quiet wars and all these things that warfare has been moving to, that we're watching. But it's also global. I mean, we're seeing Ukraine, China, all the big guns are out there. They're doing exercises with planes and boats now. And do we really have to do this? Does our economy have to be based on using all our money this way? I think there's questions to be asked.
Why go to war when we need that money to vaccinate people?
Right.
Touche, mon ami.
All right. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, John.
Oh,
So,
thank you,
we're at
Mark.
the end of the
Thank you,
hour.
Mark. Thanks for all your hard work. It means a lot.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, John.
Awesome
We got
show,
a lot
Carol.
of hard workers here. But I think things are changing too. So we're starting to feel it, and that's exciting.
Right. Onward and upward.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Stay safe and effective.
Oh, I love that.
Coming up in 3 minutes will be the news hour with Andy DeBala. And I think we're going to play you out with Mark's outro, if I can find it. Okay, here we go.
While John W. is looking for Housatonic's outro, I just want to let you guys know you can go to HousatonicITS.com to catch up on all of Mark Kulak's research. And you can also go to NeighborhoodNewsStudio.com and hit that video archive button. We've officially got rid of the NNS 24/7 paywall. All of our videos are free once again, so go ahead. Go dig into our research, go dig into our past content, and share it. Share it with your friends, share it with your family. The only way we're going to take down the deep state is by changing people's minds, by changing the perception of who's in control of things. Us here at neighborhoodnewsstudio.com know the powers that be. And there's a lot of sheeple out there that just are out there with their head in the sand, just pounding the pavement every day, that need their eyes open, and they need to be enlightened to what's really going on. So make sure you like and share the content we do work so hard to put out to our audience every day. You got the video ready, John?
Ready to go, Mr. DeBala.
All right. I'll be coming on after this outro. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning into Neighborhood News Hour with your host, Andy Dabala. That's me. As you can see with this beautiful landscape behind me, as I pointed out on George Webb Show, that wrong finger. That right there, that's the Stanley Hotel up here in Estes Park, Colorado, where Stephen King was inspired to write The Shining. And I'm here. My brother, he had a child, a boy, continued the Dabala bloodline here in Colorado. So I'm out here celebrating the growth of the Dabala family. He's a nice, healthy young lad with big feet, long legs, and a full head of black hair. He doesn't have the blonde locks. Not everyone has that little touch to get the blonde. Some people are blessed. That's all I gotta say. He is a part Italian. I keep making fun of my brother and his wife, saying, "Yeah, I knew we got a guy in the family. You gotta look out for you now." But we also got someone in the family. You can send them out, break some legs if things aren't going well. We got someone that's tough in the family finally. So I look forward to him getting older and getting some things to start going the Dabala family way. Well, we are here at Neighborhood News Hour. I do have some video clips just to let you know what's ahead of you for the next hour before we get into Wendy's World with Wendy Sloan and Norman Smith. I'm going to be doing some news here. I got some news articles to be showcasing you guys. And there's been a lot of talk about Davos and what's going on what happened at Davos over the past week. And we've been chatting about what's going on. I'm going to play some videos of some Henry Kissinger talks, some Klaus Schwab speeches at the Davos. So we know with the Great Reset and the overpopulation of the planet and the vaccination plan that they had in store for the human population from the last Davos meetings. I just want you guys to really kind of see what they have in store for us in the future. So I'm gonna get the show started off here. I have a video. This was done by Michael Schellenberger, and it's about the homeless population out in LA. And here it's going to relate to, I guess, another story I have after I share this video.
Broad daylight, I saw someone get raped.
Raped, bullied, picked on, stripped naked, robbed.
Somebody gets stabbed.
I mean, like someone robbed me with a machete today of all my stuff.
Hit in the head with crowbars and bats.
I saw a dude get shot in the back of the head.
Somebody getting shot.
Did they live?
No.
You will end up getting hurt out here.
The other homeless people are like your worst enemy.
These people do not play out here. Besides, I have weapons. I have protections.
Okay. What kind of weapons?
Bats, hatchets, knives, mace, tasers.
And what's your drug of choice, brother?
Heroin.
Crystal meth.
Meth and heroin.
Crystal meth.
Meth?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that does.
You don't know anybody that doesn't smoke meth?
No.
We saw a woman who was pregnant just now.
Yeah.
What is she smoking? She's smoking fentanyl, and she's 8 months pregnant?
So are you seeing more people showing up in psychotic states naked now than, say, 2-3 years ago?
Yes, I think so.
I don't know what they're putting in this stuff. I don't know if it was aliens. I'm not trying to sound crazy and stuff.
No, it's fine.
Must be causing all these like psychological breakdowns. And I think that they had put like a transmitter or something. Because I was able to hear and communicate, and it looked like I was talking to myself.
My job was to intake homeless individuals on the street.
I don't have to be on the streets. I just choose to be.
You just choose to be?
A lot of people are out here because they want to be out here.
Everyone usually has a serious drug problem.
They kind of quit society.
This right now is literally by choice.
Did you get the sense that that cared whether they were on drugs?
No, and I'm not trying to be like crazy with it, but definitely not.
I mean, if we're gonna be realistic, they pay you to be homeless here.
They make it so easy and normalize it.
Drug dealers are just being let go over and over and over.
It's like the cops are. It's like they're your neighbor, you know.
They enable them because they allow the open air drug market.
Open street dealing like that, with the cops just across the street, like watching them.
I think they've given up on the people that are out there on the street.
I've never seen anything like it. I've been in the game for fucking 30 years, dude. Never seen anything like it.
It's done by Michael Schellenberger, who's running for governor of California. And you do see a growing homeless population out there. I've been in Austin, and you can see it here in Denver, Colorado. You can see an uptick in the homeless, and in the spring and summer and fall months. It's definitely an issue, and we've seen over the past couple of years the rise in fentanyl deaths. I've had family and friends affected by drugs and drug overdoses. I've had friends that passed away from this stuff, and yeah, they with the vaccines, whatever they're putting in the actual drugs now, you don't know what's coming in over the border. This just makes everything. The border crisis just makes all these drugs easier to flood into America, and you see a huge problem out in California with this growing homeless population, and in Texas, and people with nowhere to turn to, and we're dumping government resources into these people who just kind of want to be there. Like the guy said, they're paying they're paying people pretty much to be homeless. You saw they were housing them during the COVID crisis, trying to keep people separate. But um, it's something that needs to be addressed and taken care of. The everyone matters on this planet, and we can't have any lives lost due to drugs. And that leads me into my next story here in Canada. In British Columbia, they're starting a trial here where they're decriminalizing cocaine, MDMA, and other drugs. And we've seen some of this in America as well, with, I believe, in Oregon and Washington, they've legalized mushrooms. I know here in Denver, Colorado, they decriminalized the use and growth of mushrooms, and those are psychedelics that are, I guess, being used to fight depression. But when you're decriminalizing cocaine and MDMA and some of the harder drugs, you're this homeless population that we see growing through in the United States and other places around the world is just gonna get worse. And I'm gonna read a little bit of this story here. So, Canada has announced it will temporarily decriminalize the possession of small amounts of some illicit drugs in British Columbia. The province asked for the criminal code exemption after overdoses claimed more than 2,000 lives in British Columbia last year. This time limited 3-year trial is the first of its kind in Canada. Adults will be allowed to possess a combined total of 2.5 grams of opioids, cocaine, methamphetamine, and MDMA. While those substances will remain illegal, adults found in possession for personal use will not be arrested, charged, or have their drugs seized. Instead, they will be offered information on available health and social services. So they're not even taking the drugs. They're literally letting you keep your drugs, your illegal drugs, the drugs, like they said, they're still illegal, but they're just going to give you a little pamphlet on how to use your drugs responsibly. In its request to the federal government last year, BC said it asked for the drug laws exemption in order to remove the shame that often prevents people from reaching out for life-saving help. Federal Minister of Mental Health and Addictions Carolyn Bennett said on Tuesday Tuesday that for too many years, the ideological opposition to harm reduction has cost lives. We are doing this to save lives, but also to give people using drugs their dignity and choices. Vancouver Mayor Kennedy Stewart said the decision marks a fundamental rethinking of drug policy that favors healthcare over handcuffs. The program, there's nothing about healthcare. I understand taking the handcuffs away. I kind of agree with that. I'm a freedom loving American. If you want to go ahead and do drugs, as long as you're not hurting other people, go right ahead. To an to an extent, if you know what I mean. But I don't agree with putting people in handcuffs over things. But yeah, they're really not offering any healthcare. They're just giving people like a little pamphlet for them to break their cocaine up on and snort at a later date. No one's going to be reading that stuff. The program will run from January 31st, 2023 to January 31st, 2026. There are some exemptions to the scheme which will not apply to primary and secondary school grounds, childcare facilities, airports, or to members of Canada's military. BC declared the overdose crisis a public health emergency 5 years ago, and overdose deaths have since reached historic highs in the shadow of COVID-19 pandemic. Over 9,000 people have died of drug overdose in the province since 2016. There have been growing calls for a shift in drug policy towards a public health approach from regions across the country that has included support for some decriminalization from a number of public health officials, as well as the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. Ms. Bennett said the scheme in BC could become a template for other jurisdictions across Canada. Now, I mean, I just showed you a clip. Remember that 2-minute clip a couple minutes ago of the homeless population in California where they're talking about everyone has to carry weapons, or worried about being stabbed. It's like the homeless are in a war zone in California. It's not a safe place to be. And I hope that's not the result of the decriminalization of drugs. I understand you might want to just like tell your police department on the hush, like, hey, we're not doing this stuff anymore. But to make it public and just let everyone know, you just say, hey, just go ahead and do heroin in the middle of the street, and you won't be lambasted for it, and you'll be allowed to keep your drugs and keep on with your day. It might be a little bit of an issue, and I hope it doesn't turn into situations like they have on Skid Row. So we'll have to continue to keep an eye on what's going on in Canada. If it is successful, I could be wrong. It could be successful and save a bunch of lives. This overdose crisis is definitely a problem in the world, and it needs to be addressed and taken care of. And there's plenty of ways to skin a cat, they say. So if this is one of the ways that works, just legalizing drugs and normalizing the use of it, so people kind of don't really do it that much. I hope, I guess that could work. I'm not 100% sure. I hope it does though, because more lives definitely need to be saved, and that's one of our missions here at neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. So let me see here. What stories do I want to read next? All right. Sorry, bear with me for a moment. Man, there's so many ads on some of these pages. So we discuss we've discussed SADS to SARS here with George Webb and Research Roadshow and neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. How the development of this zoonosis theory and how our health authorities are trying to block the transmission of viruses and diseases from wild animals to domestic animals to humans. And here we have Vietnam develops world's first African swine fever vaccine for commercial use. And we saw the videos from China in 2019 of all the pigs being thrown in the pits and the thermite being thrown on top of them, and they were having mass burials, and that was because of this African swine flu. And like we there could be a theory that the SARS was developed from SADS. We know in Ukraine there was some SADS outbreaks in 2014, and we've learned since then that they have plenty of biological laboratories working on this stuff in Ukraine. And yeah, I hope it wasn't because of this dual use gain of function research that the SARS epidemic happened. But here we go. Excuse me while I take a quick drink of my Gatorade. I got yelled at for drinking coffee from McDonald's, everyone. Had an earlier show, so I've switched to sugary Gatorade, pretty much Kool-Aid with a health label on it. Tricking our kids, tricking me on a daily basis. It tastes so good. So Vietnam develops, I hope I'm not on mute. Okay. Vietnam develops world's first African swine fever vaccine for commercial use. Vietnam said on Wednesday it had successfully developed a vaccine to administer to pigs to fight African swine fever with the aim of becoming the first country to commercially produce and export it. African swine fever, one of the most devastating livestock diseases, was first detected in Vietnam in February 2019 and forced the country to cull around 20% of its hog herd last year. It originated in Africa before spreading to Europe and Asia and has killed hundreds of millions of pigs globally. African swine fever is harmless to humans. It originated in Africa. Everything does, because that's where Bill and Melinda Gates like to do their research. This is a milestone of the veterinary industry, Deputy Agriculture Minister Phung Duc Tin said in a statement. With immunity lasting 6 months, the vaccine will be a shield for hog raising industry and pig production globally. Now that sounds a lot like the new mRNA SARS vaccine, doesn't it? It only lasts 6 months. I know pigs will probably be I don't know how fast pigs grow and when they put them down to be put into the bacon industry, but 6 months might be long enough for pigs. But it's definitely not long enough for humans, and that's why what you're calling a vaccine and your continuation to push the jab on the human race is despicable. You CDC, Anthony Fauci, piece of junk. You and your junk science. The vaccine has been in. The vaccine has been in development since November 2019 in partnership with United States experts, with 5 clinical trials held. So they started this, this SADS vaccine in 2019. Well, they were working on it. They were holding clinical trials. And all of a sudden you have a SARS outbreak. I wonder if George Webb's theory in SADS to SARS was correct. And you see here, in partnership with United States experts. That's pretty much what happens at every biosafety laboratory around the world. Oh yeah, they developed it in Singapore, but the United States had its hands in the making, and they'll have their hands in the distribution of the vaccine as well. Okay, that's part of the rules when we set up a biolab in your country. And this is something Michael Callahan specialized in. I've showcased in videos of him talking about the Asian biomedical market and how they are just like light years ahead of where we are in the US because of our pause on gain of function research and our pause on some other types of medical research like fetal tissue research that really kind of put a hold of us here in the United States. So the Asian markets, they were just going nuts. And so he was making the case, we got to lift the gain of function. We got to lift the fetal tissue research so we can catch up to the Asian markets. And as you can tell here, it really doesn't matter because the United States experts have their hands in the clinical trials anyway. Excuse me while I take another drink of this Gatorade. Wendy Sloan coming up at 5 o'clock. Wendy's World. Wendy's World. It's party time. It's happening. Wendy's World. Its safety and efficacy was confirmed by I don't even know if I can talk for another half hour. Its safety and efficacy was confirmed by the Agricultural Research Service under the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Teen said. This success opens great expectations, and the room to explore African swine fever vaccine produced in Vietnam is huge, Teen said. He did not provide a time frame for when the vaccine could be exported or estimate of Vietnam's production capacity. Although the swine fever outbreak was subsided in Vietnam, allowing farmers to rebuild hog herds, the virus is still hurting farms in some countries. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it here first. SADS to SARS. Neighborhood News Studio. George Webb. Research wins again. Make sure we'll keep an eye on that story and see who gets in charge of the production of the the SADS vaccine. As Michelle Bombay Meslin. I don't know. I tried to put an accent on there. Michelle, I'm sorry. Poor pig. The big bad wolf came to the house and huffed and he puffed and he blew a bioweapon all over the pigs. Called African swine fever. He didn't even need to blow their house down. He did not. Because he killed them with a bioweapon. That is what is happening to the human population as well. All right. I don't know why I'm laughing when I'm talking about the deep state murdering us through vaccinations. Let's see here. Do I want to get into Klaus Schwab, Henry Kissinger, Bill Gates, and Davos, or do I got some other stories to read? I do have some other stories, but I'm feeling quite hoarse to tell you the truth. So, actually, let me get into this one. Maybe one more. Maybe one more. So, man 30 dies after collapsing at Brooklyn half marathon finish line. 16 others hospitalized. A runner who participated in the RBC Brooklyn Half Marathon died after collapsing at the finish line, FDNY officials said. The 30-year-old made it to the finish line at Coney Island before going into cardiac arrest around 8:45 a.m., authorities said. Officials confirmed 16 other runners were taken to local hospitals. 4 are in serious condition, 8 with non-life-threatening injuries, and the other 4 have minor injuries, according to FDNY. We are deeply saddened by the passing of a participant following 2022 RBC Brooklyn Half. Our thoughts and sympathies are with the runner's family and those close to them. The male runner, age 30, collapsed after finishing the race. He was immediately attended to by on-site medical staff and then transported to Coney Island Hospital. NYRR, as the medical staff placed from start to finish throughout the race, who responded immediately. So I just am wondering, we've seen this with athletes around the world, especially soccer. We've seen it in some MMA sports as well. actually college sports, of people just collapsing and not being able to perform at a normal level. And I've ran a half marathon before, and I mean, I did it when I was probably like 27, but it was relatively easy. I didn't really even train for it. I was in shape at the time, but it's not anything where if you train for it, where you're going to have these types of issues. And he went under cardiac arrest. And I just hope it's not due to more of these jabs. We've seen with Bill Taylor and D State Analytics that like the swim times of children and teenagers and college athletes across the country are getting worse. We've just seen athletes just times just they're not as good as they were previously. And I'm thinking that's because of the jab. It had to set them back at some uh, in some ways, and we're seeing a lot of athletes around the world. These are people in tip-top shape. They don't have like cardiac issues like this. Or there's maybe like one in a million, but not at the rate we are seeing around the world. So just keep staying informed, keep staying up to date on what's going on. And before you get that jab, they're going to be pushing the coronavirus variants, or pushing monkeypox and smallpox. They're going to be pushing a lot of these viruses in the future, which means they're going to be pushing a lot of these vaccines. And we've seen the ramifications of the COVID-19 vaccine, the mRNA vaccine. So just be aware what's going on, and make an educated decision before you give yourself or a loved one the jab. So I'm officially hoarse. My voice is tired. My knees are weak. My arms are spaghetti. What's the rest of that song by Eminem? Knees weak, arms spaghetti. Got vomit on my sweater. My arms are heavy. You know what song I'm talking about.
Mom's spaghetti.
My mom's spaghetti.
Lose yourself.
Lose yourself. So I got some videos of Davos here that I wanted to kind of point out. Do you have some news articles, John? It is news hour.
No, but I just wanted to point out that Wendy's going to have a couple of big ones. And so you're going to promo Wendy's World tonight at 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific, and 11 p.m. if you're still awake in Paris.
Who's our guest today?
I forget. But yeah, it's going to be a good one.
All right. Well, Wendy's World at 5 o'clock. It's Wendy's World. It's Wendy's World. It's party time. It's happening.
I just realized, Andy, that the song opens with, "If you had one shot, just one shot, what would it be? Johnson & Johnson? Merck?"
That is true. And then your arms turn to spaghetti afterwards and your knees get weak. Eminem, he was prediction. Eminem predicted the future.
Vomit on your sweater?
That's great, John. That's great. We'll have to make a music video with him, with that song in the background, breaking down the virus. That's actually fantastic. So, I have a couple of highlights here of the Davos. We've been talking a lot about Davos, and we kind of just say what we think happened at Davos and kind of sum up some of the things we heard. And here's some words straight from the horse's mouth. Here's Henry Kissinger on the Ukraine Russian conflict, and he's actually telling the Ukraine to give up some of the territory. Have a listen.
In my view, a movement towards negotiations and negotiations on peace need to begin the next 2 months or so. The outcome of the war should be outlined by them before it creates upheavals and tensions that will be even harder to overcome. And particularly between the eventual relationship of Russia towards Europe and of Ukraine towards Europe. Ideally, the dividing line should return to the status quo ante. I believe pursuing the war beyond that point would turn it into a war not about the freedom of Ukraine, which has been undertaken with great cohesion by NATO, but into a war against Russia itself. And so this seems to me to be the dividing line, that it is just and possible to define, and it will be difficult.
So they have Henry Kissinger saying that they should give up the land that they obtained from Russia and call for peace, because if they pretty much don't stop now or within the next couple months, this new cohesion between all the countries in NATO is going to just create a new, just different type of war with Russia itself, something just completely unrelated to the freedom of the Ukrainian people, because that's all Russia's really fighting for. They wanted back the land that was theirs, and they said that the people living on that land were being pretty much killed by these Azov battalion neo-Nazis, and they're there to free them from the neo-Nazis. That's all they want to do. And Henry Kissinger, I guess, is on board with that plan, or else he says it's going to get a lot worse and just turn into something that no one in the world wants, and that's pretty much World War III with NATO versus Russia. And we see the U.S. arming NATO with those long range, or arming Ukraine with those long range missile launchers. We see Germany giving them weapons. We see all these different countries putting their bid in to join NATO now because of this conflict. And I mean, it is odd to me that Henry Kissinger isn't on board with this plan. I don't know. It was kind of like a little curveball. I did have this queued up for George Webb earlier today, because I kind of wanted his insights on it and what he thought about what Henry's saying here, because he's saying, yeah, just kind of put a stop to it and give Putin his land back. And let's stop with the nonsense and go back to our normal way of life. Well, that's at least what it seemed like to me, but George Rice has a nice spin to put on it. So I wanted to kind of see his remarks when it came to that. So I have the closing remarks here. Actually, should I do closing remarks or preparing for the next pandemic? I'm gonna do preparing for the next pandemic, then the closing remarks by Klaus Schwab. So here we have, let me just get to like Bill Gates talking. This is Bill Gates and his little spiel here at the World Economic Forum a couple days ago.
I want to start with Bill Gates. Your new book is titled How to Prevent the Next Pandemic, but this panel is about preparing for the next pandemic. So, is the next pandemic really preventable?
Well, the ideal is that when you have outbreaks, that you detect them early and you contain them before they go global. Less than 2% of the deaths are in the first 100 days. And infectious disease is an exponential phenomena. And so if you let it run, then it's very difficult to rein it back in. The true exemplars, the variance between the death rates in countries with similar GDPs is quite dramatic. You have almost, a factor of 50 between the good performers and the poor performers, where sadly the US is in that poor performer category. And there's clear things that they did. If those were done early around the outbreak, then you could prevent it from spreading to lots and lots of countries. So that certainly should be the goal, is to not let it go global.
And
So he's saying pretty much that 15-day lockdown that we were all supposed to go on in the beginning of the pandemic, we probably should have just done that for 2 straight years and just really limited the spread of this virus, and we could have eliminated all the variants and nipped it in the butt. We all got to make sacrifices here on this planet, and we got to be prepared. And this is something they are trying to implement here. They're trying to with the panic, the public health crisis that SARS kind of went through with this next virus, with this next disease. They want it to be like, you remember what happened to SARS? We did the 15-day lockdown and it didn't work. So this next time around, we need to do it a little bit. We need to be a little bit more stringent. You're going to see the QR codes start to come out. You're going to probably see some more, I wouldn't say forced vaccination, but coerced vaccinations. They're trying to convince you to take them. And there's they might have the longer lockdowns. They might have, like in Australia, they had those, they're almost like concentration camps, lockdown camps, COVID camps, where if you got the virus, they sent you to camp. They might go to some more extreme measures. And this is just something that we need to be aware of, because here in Davos, they set this plan, and if we don't pay attention, they're just going to implement it without any retaliation.
we'll explore some of those very specific things that countries and institutions can do to help prevent the next pandemic. President Kagame, let me ask you, what do you see as the top lessons that we've learned about preparing for the next pandemic from dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic?
To begin with, we have to act as if
well, there certainly was time enough.
Was not disseminated.
How to fight the pandemic, we can emerge from this stronger, and we should make a commitment. You started with this. We can't prevent future outbreaks, but we should commit to say this could be the last pandemic we see.
Right. Let me follow up with Bill Gates on something that was really important about what Francis said, which was that you were in Wuhan, you were able to identify using next generation sequencing the risk, but that information was not disseminated as widely as it should have been. And there was, this degree of inaction. And before we even get to the policy piece, which is very important, I'd like to ask Bill Gates, since you cover this in your book, how do we come up with a coordinated effort? What is the path to creating some sort of global response so that we can help the weakest link get stronger?
Well, there certainly was time enough for some countries to respond and have, very, very mild pandemics. Ground zero, wherever the emergence takes place, is always going to have the toughest job. Will they see an elevation in respiratory symptoms? Will they see an elevation in deaths? Will they run a diagnostic panel? They're not going to be sequencing everything. But when you get an elevation or you get your normal diagnostic panel showing something unusual, then you've got to start sequencing. And, so there could be more delay in reaction if we have a country with low capacity and we don't have a global team. People always talk about, oh, let's help countries do better. Yeah, we should help countries do better. But a lot of the pandemic risks are in countries when the next several decades will not have that local capacity. So you have to have global capacity. If you're serious about pandemics, you have to have global capacity that can come in and do those things. So we see that a lot. But here,
I would say right there, he's talking about setting up that worldwide global biosurveillance network. Not every country has that local capacity, but if we set up a metabiota mobile biolab everywhere and and have some way of them to report to the WHO and set up this new World Health Authority, and then we could really start controlling everything on a global scale, unlike how we did last time. Because there were some countries that didn't listen to what we had to tell them to do here at Event 201 and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So we're the worldwide leading experts on all this stuff. So we want everyone to be on board next time around. We don't want anyone to slip through the cracks. I like my Bill Gates
we're lucky.
impression.
If this had been 10 years ago, some of these vaccine technologies did not exist. If it comes 10 years from now, we should have far, far better diagnostic technology. That is, be able to scale up every country within a month to diagnose their entire population. We should have much better therapeutics, some of which will be pathogen independent. And then, as we do come up with vaccines, we want vaccines that are infection blocking and long duration, which today, the vaccines have saved millions of lives, but they don't have much in the way of duration, and they're not good at infection blocking.
President Kagame, how should health organizations and leaders sort of measure the humanitarian impact of pandemics, and how should that factor into?
Reminds people, wow, we're not. Reminds people.
How do we do that when there are other concerns that or a recession, even as we're contending with high inflation? Countries still need to, and leaders in private sector still need to make pandemic preparedness or prevention a top priority. How do we do that when there are other concerns that keep creeping into the conversation?
Well, we're certainly at risk that global health issues may get deprioritized as there's so much else going on, whether it's the ongoing pandemic or
climate change. You didn't hear much talk about climate change in the past couple of years while the pandemic was ravaging the world, right? And that's what he's chatting about. Some of these global issues that we really care about will be set aside because this is the real moneymaker.
Peter says, however you characterize HIV, malaria, and TB, where, the equity issue there is super dramatic. And it's good in a way that, when infectious diseases hit rich countries, it reminds people, wow, we're not the only ones suffering from this. What about these great tools that we have access to? When the prevalence goes down in the rich countries, that awareness tends to diminish. Now, various.
He's pretty much saying we needed to hit the rich countries like the United States, Germany, France, and England, India, Saudi Arabia. We needed to hit all these countries, Canada, with a pandemic, or else, we won't get the funding. If it's just a bunch of small villages in Africa that just keep having these outbreaks, and it never really floods into the first world countries, there's going to be a lack of funding there. And that's really kind of what we saw in the early 90s. The funding for this the vaccines and the medicine and this tropical medicine that the Rockefeller Foundation had been working on for so long, it was all drying up. So in comes the Russian scientists, in comes the gain of function research, in comes a new set of viruses that have never before been seen on this earth, and in comes the new vaccines because those new viruses spread into the first world countries, and that's what the World Bank Group was worried about from the start.
Bilateral programs like US PEPFAR and the Multilateral Global Fund have done a good job reducing a lot of that inequity. But it'll be an interesting test. There's a replenishment that comes up probably in the last quarter where Global Fund's going to go out and ask for an increase from 14 billion to 18 billion. And we'll see in the face of all these priorities that are, I agree, absolutely important priorities. Can global health maintain the visibility that it deserves? Lots of work to do on this pandemic, lots of work to do on those 3 diseases, and lots of work to do on those health systems. That's the front line for all the things we're talking about. And those investments, are very dramatic in terms of the payoffs you get, in terms of the human capacity you get by getting rid of these disease burdens.
Maybe I'll add one other dimension to this discussion, because public health funding is going to be an important factor here in terms of combating the future pandemic. But one of the realizations I think that people have been coming to over the last couple of years is that combating pathogens is not just a public health priority, it's also a defense priority. And I remember I had this conversation in the White House actually in March of 2020 when we were sitting around, and there was a realization that we could have been under a bioterrorist attack and been under attack for weeks, and many people were dying, and we didn't know the source, we didn't know how to combat it. And so I think there's sort of an increasing awareness that combating a pathogen is increasingly a defense priority too, that the next attack, it may be the next coronavirus or the next antimicrobial resistance, but it could be a bioterrorist weapon. And so what that brings into the equation is that we're not just necessarily looking for public health funding, which unfortunately goes through surges and then dies off, but we should be accessing defense budgets too. And those, unfortunately, tend to be more perennial. But we've got to remember that, again, fighting pathogens is not just a public health priority, it's a global defense priority too.
And gentlemen, there's pathogens should have access to the defense budget. It's not a public health priority, it's a defense priority as well. And if they're trying to prove that point, I've showcased on other live with Andes. They created an extinct horsepox virus in a lab. They created monkeypox virus in a lab. They created smallpox in Canada. And these are all like garage labs where the scientists got together to do this experiment to see if they could get bits and pieces of DNA fragments from different companies shipped to their house. And they assembled the smallpox virus in a garage in their house by getting
It looks like Andy is frozen for a moment, so I'm going to bring up one last bit of news from Europe. If you didn't see the George Webb segment at noon, or if you turned off early, then you missed what I said about the fighter jets in Italy are all being prepped. They're all undergoing a sea level check. They're not just kicking the tires. They're making sure that everything's good to go, including hot weapons. And General Stoltenberg met a couple days ago with Mario Draghi and the Italian MOD, Ministry of Defense. And Stoltenberg's recommendation was that a certain number of Eurofighter Typhoon be painted in a special livery because these aircraft would be sent on a special mission to combat the emerging threat. And what is the emerging threat? No, it's not a hemorrhagic fever. It's those unvaccinated Canadian truckers. That is the big threat confronting Italy today. And I'm being facetious here, but no, there will be a certain number of aircraft painted in a special livery. Not exactly sure what their special mission is, but it's probably not to help the little people.
Mhm.
Anyway, Andy is back. Take it away.
Well, thank you for covering for me, John. I don't know why my internet seems to go out when we get close to the top of the hour here, but we do just remind everyone have Wendy Sloan, Wendy's World,
Wendy's World
coming on next at 5 p.m. And I have where did I leave off, John? I forget. Something about Bill Gates, the public. Oh yeah, the defense budget. They're trying to get the public health budget is trying to get access to that defense budget as well. And we know here at Neighborhood News Studio, they already got access to that. All the biolabs you see around the world that have that United States stamp of approval also have that United States Department of Defense stamp of approval. And specifically the Ukrainian biolabs, every single one of them, if a patent was created out of those biolabs, even though if it was done by Ukrainian scientists, the patents were owned by the United States Department of Defense. And we do have Wendy Sloan and Norman Smith coming on next. I'm not sure if we got their intros ready here. Let me see if it. I think I got Wendy's intro lined up here. But I got
I have
Wendy.
it up.
You do?
Yes.
Okay. It's already loaded into the Neighborhood News Studio.com video, so I'll just play it from there. But yeah, Wendy's World with Wendy Sloan, Norman Smith coming up next. Make sure you guys keep an eye on what's going on in Davos, what Bill Gates is saying. On the next news hour, I'll play Klaus Schwab's closing remarks because he tends to be one of the important guys in the World Economic Forum. And we know through the Young Global Leaders program, he pretty much owns a lot of the world's governments through their politicians, and he owns a lot of the corporations, foundations, and other things that you see happening in this world. So we'll be playing some of Klaus Schwab's remarks on the next Neighborhood News Hour. So let's hit a commercial. Actually, no, you don't. Wendy has her own slide now. I like it. All right. So without further ado, we're gonna hit the intro here for Wendy Sloan, and Wendy and Norman will be joining you next.